Now to Scotland, where the government there has scrapped the flagship climate change target they set themselves and says they'll now focus on meeting net zero targets in 2045 instead of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030. Let's bring our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillies for more on this. So, Conor, it was just a short while ago where we heard from the Secretary for Net Zero. They're saying in part of her statement that they were going to redouble efforts to reach those goals. But I guess that'll ring hollow for many, considering these were goals set themselves by this government.
Well, indeed, the phrase used by the Scottish Government in that speech was an ambitious new package of measures in order to get to that ultimate goal of net zero by the year 2045. But this has been met with scathing criticism from charities and third sector organisations, branding it an acute global embarrassment, the worst environmental decision in the history of the Scottish Parliament. And essentially we have had a change in tact from the Scottish Government, a drop of a key commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by the end of this decade. That is a commitment that is now gone. Annual targets also have been ditched and replaced with a new system. However, the overall ambition, as I mentioned, of getting to net zero by 2045, 5 years ahead of the UK plan, still remains the focus of this government. Now, this is an SNP administration here in Edinburgh who've put themselves front and centre of the debate around climate. You'll remember all those years ago in 2019, Nicola Sturgeon pivoted herself on the global stage, becoming the first country, she said, in the world to declare a climate emergency. Well, that was met with huge applause from the SNP masses at their conference at that time. Nicola Sturgeon then stood up at the COP26 climate talks in Glasgow, surrounded by the global climate activist Greta Thunberg, and again reaffirmed her commitments to put Scotland front and centre of the drive to be a world leader. Square that with the decision today from the Scottish Government and the Minister who took to the podium here at Holyrood to deliver that statement. Questions too around the Greens' involvement. Let's remember the Scottish Green Party are in partnership, in coalition essentially, with the SNP here in Holyrood. How embarrassing is that for them? Well, no doubt their opponents would suggest so. Let's have a listen now to what Mary McCallum, the Scottish Government Minister, told Holyrood a short while ago.
In this challenging context of cuts, UK backtracking, we accept the CCC's recent re-articulation that this Parliament's interim 2030 target is out of reach. We must now act to chart a course to 2045 at a pace and a scale that is feasible, fair and just. And with this in mind, I can today confirm that, working with Parliament on a timetable, the Scottish Government will bring forward expedited legislation to address matters raised by the CCC and ensure our legislative framework better reflects the reality of long-term climate policy making.
Well, that was Mary McCallum in the Chamber a short while ago, and she joins us live now on Sky News. This is a humiliation, isn't it? You are ditching that key commitment for 2030.
No, so what I'm doing is I am responding to advice that came from the Committee on Climate Change in recent weeks, which confirmed what they said when the target was set, which is that the 75% by 2030 was beyond a pathway that they could reasonably see was feasible. So what I'm doing is that I'm making minor legislative adjustments so that Scotland can continue to deliver on climate change in the way that we have in recent years.
But these were targets set by your own party, by your former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, who took great pleasure in going on the world stage and saying that Scotland is a leader on this. Fast forward a couple of years, you're standing in Holyrood watering that down.
So the targets, as I said, were set on a cross-party basis. Every party in the Scottish Parliament voted for them, except the Greens, in fact, who wanted to go further still. And if you want an example of how important Scotland's influence has been on the world stage, at COP26, Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish Government, we stood with Global South campaigners and we helped to end a 3-decade-long impasse on loss and damage funding. That's influence in the world stage.
Now, you're in partnership with the Green Party here in Scotland. What were those conversations like when you broke it to the Scottish Green Party that you were ditching this 2030 target?
It's not a case of breaking it, it's a case of cooperating on the approach to it and how we...
But they've got to be the first Green Party in the world to be part of a government that essentially is changing its path on net zero.
So the changing of the path to net zero, this minor adjustment that I have to make to the 2030 target, is actually about making sure that we can continue to make progress so that we have a trajectory which is set in evidence, which is pragmatic and ambitious, and it suits both the Greens and the SNP to have a pathway to delivery, which is both those things.
Mary McCallum, thank you very much for speaking to us live on Sky News this afternoon. The charities, third sector organisations will take time, no doubt, to digest this announcement here today, but clearly this has been yet another bruising moment for the Scottish Government.